Welcome to part 11 of our series of videos on creating a Blazor application using Syncfusion controls and Dapper. We've pretty much finished the application now from a major point of view. We've got our master detail page working. We've got the detail records being added, edited and deleted, and a method of displaying everything. We've got some tidying up to do though. In this video, we're going to look at data integrity, a tiny bit on styling. We're going to remove redundant code. And lastly, I'm going to leave you with a challenge. Let's have a look at the code. If you haven't already got Visual Studio open it, and we'll start by looking at data integrity. And to illustrate a couple of points, we'll actually run the application. Whether intentionally or not, users will be attempting to break the application. And if there's a weakness in the application, they'll find it. And to illustrate that, let me just have a look at cities and look at France. At the moment, we've got that the city name is required, and we've got a population that will default to 0. But if I try editing Paris, I can put a negative value in there, which is obviously a situation that we want to avoid. Similarly, if I go to add a city and try saving it without entering a city name, the city name is required, but if I try saving it, we haven't handled the situation where it's left blank and we get an unhandled exception, C Browser DevTools for details. Now the user's not going to be terribly impressed by that, so we need to stop it. So let's close this and go back to the code. We could probably put validation rules in C# by testing for values before they come back, before it's written to the database, that kind of thing. But there's a much easier way, and it's using something called data annotations. Data annotations require two basic, relatively simple steps. First of all, on the data models, so let's start off with countries, you have to have using system component model data annotations. Alan Simpson's code seems to put that in there for us already. And because we said at the SQL level that these fields were required and the string length, we've already got required and string length 50 attached to the country name. So what we have to do here is add in something that's going to return back the error message to the user if they try to enter invalid data. So in here, we'll copy that and paste it in here. So string length 50, if we change that to string length 50, comma, and then have an error message equals name is too long, it cannot be longer than 50 characters, that will warn the user that they've made an error. Perhaps we should have a semicolon at the end of that. No, square bracket. So that's for countries. For cities, we want the same requirement for a message for the string length, but on the city population, perhaps we want to restrict that, say, between 0 and 5 million. So we can enforce that by saying that we want a range from 0 to 50 million, and the error message is going to say population must be between 0 and 50 million. So if they try entering a negative number, they'll get the error message. So that's stage 1. So I'll save that. Stage 2 is to make some changes to the forms where the user is going to be entering data. And on countries, is going to be on countries add edit, and we need to do two things. Within the edit form tags, we need to add data annotations validator to say that it's being used. So I'll put it in there. And the other thing is to put in some tags with the validation message. So for the countries, I'm going to put it underneath the actual, under the text box where the user puts in the country name. Now, depending on the number of fields that you want to validate and how long the form is, you can put this validation message anywhere on the form. Maybe you want to put them at the top of the form or next to a submit button or somewhere like that, so the user can see what the error message is and the field that's been affected. So that's on countries. On the cities, that's done on this page. So we want to add in the data annotation validator. And we need to do that in the edit form. And it's got to be within the edit form tags. So I'll put it in here. And we also need it in the edit cities, because we've got two dialogues, one for adding and one for editing. And we also need to add the error messages. So for the city's name, we'll put these directly underneath the boxes. So that goes after here. And we also need similar error messages for the edit. Now notice I fell into a trap earlier that the message requires the model, and if you recall, we were using a different model for the edit cities from the add cities, so I couldn't just copy the error message from up here because that wouldn't have applied to this particular form. Right, let's finish the job off. And we'll save it and test it. I'll have a look at France. Oops, we'll look at cities first of all. Let's look at France. We've still got that negative in there. If I edit it and make it a positive number to start with, that's fine. If I now edit it again and try and put a negative number in there, we get an error message in red saying population must be between 0 and 50 million. So that's preventing me from entering an invalid population. Now, if I go to add a city and try and save it, it tells me that the city name is required. So I can't enter a city without entering a city name. So let's put in Lyon, population of 2 million. Probably, that'll do. Right, so that should have handled the data validation. Let's close it and go back to the code. By default, Blazor installs and uses Bootstrap 4 for styling. Like my knowledge of C#, I know virtually nothing about CSS or Bootstrap, so very little styling has been applied to the project so far, and not a lot is about to be added, just the minimum to make it look a tiny bit better. The first item I'm going to tackle is that both the countries and cities data grids are the full width of the screen. Bootstrap splits the screen into 12 columns, and we can restrict the width that the grids show by applying a Bootstrap styling to that. So let's have a look at, first of all, the countries, which is index. And we can wrap the heading and the grid in a div with some styling attached to it. So let me paste in what I've got here. So it's a div, and with the class equals col for columns. SM refers to the size of the screen, and 8 is 8 of the 12 columns. So let's just close that out there. And it might look better as well if we put a line break between the countries list and the heading. And we can do the same for the countries and cities. So I'll put that div across countries and cities, and I'll close it out here. Actually, I could put it at, no, I'll put it at the very bottom here. And we'll put in another line break in here to make it look a little bit better. The Bootstrap documentation has got a lot more about the styling and the classes that can be added. It would be a good idea to have a look at that at some point. So let's see what it looks like. Right, so now we can see that we've got the width of the grid is only going about 2/3 of the way across the form, and there's a gap between countries list and the grid. There are probably a few more things we can do to tidy this up a little bit. First of all, with only showing 5 records, we can probably increase that to 10 or so to fill the page a little bit more. We've also got the country ID. The end user won't need to see that, so it's probably a good idea to not show it. And we've also got the filter system here, which isn't abundantly clear what it is, but you can put in filter criteria into these text boxes. There's a slightly better way of doing that within Syncfusion. And if we look at the cities, you'll now see that we've now got, let's go, we're only going 2/3 of the way across the form, but we've got the population here. It might be nice to have the total population for a particular country. So let's set about making those few minor changes. So let's go to the index page to start with, and first of all we'll get rid of the country ID column. So I'll just delete that. The other thing is that we have a page size of 5. Well, let's just change that to 10. Very straightforward. And the filter option. Now we've got allow filtering is true here, and that puts in that default text box at the top. But we can also use this option here. It has to be within the SF grid tags, so I can put it, let's put it right at the top. And it's saying use the Syncfusion Blazor Grid's filter type menu, and we'll then get a pop-up box with a little filter icon. So that's that for the index page. On the countries and cities, we want to put the totals in there. The code for that is quite extensive, considering all we want is to put the total in there. But let me copy that, and that has to be within the SF grid, and it's a grid aggregate. So basically what we're saying is we want to aggregate the column city population, and the type is going to be sum. There are others such as averaging and count, and the format is n, which is comma separated thousands. And then we just explain in the footer template here what's being aggregated. So let's give that a go and see what that looks like. So yes, now we've got rid of the ID, we've got 10 records on the page, could be possibly a few more, and we've got a filter button here that pops up the option to just enter exactly what you want in here. So that looks slightly nicer. And if we go to cities, we've now got the population, total population of the cities in the grid. So that's fine. Okay, so that's that. We could carry on making this, adding tweaks to this and so on and so forth, but I think that's good enough for what we're trying to do. The last section here is to get rid of redundant code. There's nothing worse when maintaining code than trying to work out what code is doing when it's not doing anything. It can lead to a lot of red herrings and a lot of frustration. So the areas where we have got redundant code is, first of all, in the SQL, we've got stored procedures we don't need, and in the cities and countries model classes, again, we've got things in there that we, in the service we don't need. So in the cities service, for example, let's see what we've got here that we can get rid of. We don't need insert because we're using insert with duplicate checking. So let's get rid of this. We need get all, we need get one, we need get by country, and we don't need cities update because again we're doing cities update with duplicate checking. So let's get rid of that. Cities delete, yes, we're using. So let's get rid of that comment. Right, so that's city service. City service. We don't need cities update. And we don't need cities insert. I think those are the two things we got rid of. Delete, update with duplicate, get one, get all, insert. Yep, that's fine. And on countries service, we've got the same thing. We don't need we do need insert with duplicate checking. We do need countries get all. We do need countries get one. We do need update with duplicates check. And we need to delete. So I have already deleted that from there. Let's just start SQL Management Studio. And database is countries DB, programmability, stored procedures. We want to get rid of insert. and update. Countries, insert and update. Right, one more test just to make sure we haven't broken anything. Countries list. We can edit one, or so it seems. We can add them. If we try saving without adding a name, that works. Cities. Yeah, it all seems to be working fine. Now, the challenge. In here, we've got total population for the cities for a particular country. The challenge is to add the total of those populations into a column on the countries list. I think as a hint, I would say it's probably best to tackle this at the SQL end of things. And as a further hint, I think probably you ought to look out for nulls. So watch out for countries that have got no cities because they could cause a problem. So that's the challenge. Code available for everything, including all the forms and the SQL. Thank you very much. I'll put a link in the description for the code that we've used today and for the complete project. If you'd like to leave any comments, I'll certainly read them, and I look forward to reading your suggestions for how this could be improved. Thank you.